we're ready to start.
That's my cue.
That's your cue. Yes.
Welcome to the July 20th, 2021 meeting of the City of Charleston Board of Zoning Appeals zoning. Present are Mr. Morrison, Mr. Judon, Mr. Rass, Ms. Richards, Ms. Vargas, Mr. Bennett, and Mr. Robinson. Present from the planning staff are Mr. Batchelder, Ms. Ashby, and Mr. Valentine. These proceedings are being recorded. We ask that those who speak identify themselves for the record. We'll conduct this meeting in usual fashion. We'll first receive information from city staff about the application and the recommendation. If the recommendation is favorable and no one objects to the application, usually the Board of Zoning Appeals treats the matter as being uncontested and passes it as a matter of course. If, however, the city recommends against the application or there is opposition to the application, we treat the application as contested and hear from the applicant and anyone else who is in favor of the application. Next, we hear from anyone opposed, followed by a short rebuttal from the applicant. We then close the public hearing portion of the meeting for that particular application and open discussion to the Board of Zoning Appeals members only. We'll then make a decision to approve with conditions, or deny the application. The Board of Zoning Appeals zoning has the authority to do three things. First, to hear appeals to decisions of the zoning administrator. Second, grant special exceptions, a fact-finding function of the board. And third, grant variances to the zoning ordinance if the application meets the hardship test outlined in section 54-924 of the ordinance. The board may deliberate and make a final decision on a matter by a majority vote of members present at the hearing and qualified to vote, provided that not less than a quorum is present and qualified to vote. However, an affirmative vote of 2/3 of the board members present and voting shall be required before a use variance may be granted. For a variance to be granted, the Board of Zoning Appeals must make the following findings. A, that they are extraordinary and exceptional conditions pertaining to the particular piece of property. B, these conditions do not generally apply to other property in the vicinity. C, because of these conditions, the application of the ordinance to the particular piece of property would effectively prohibit or unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property. And D, the authorization of a variance will not be of substantial detriment to adjacent property or to the public good, and the character of the district will not be harmed by the granting of the variance. We have two items on the agenda that will not be heard tonight. The first is item number 7, 16 Broughton Street, and that item is being deferred. Item 16, 550 Rutledge Avenue, has been withdrawn. Neither of these items will be heard tonight. First item on the agenda is a review of the minutes of the June 15th, 2021 board meeting. Does the board have any corrections, additions, or deletions that they wish to make tonight? Hearing none, Mr. Morrison moves for approval, seconded by Mr. Judon. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Mr. Morrison?
Aye.
Mr. Judon?
Aye.
Ms. Grass?
Aye.
Ms. Richards?
Aye.
Ms. Vargas?
Aye.
Mr. Bennett?
Aye.
Mr. Robinson votes aye. The motion is unanimously approved. Next item on the agenda, number 2, 80 Ashley Avenue, at the prerogative of the chair, has been moved to the end of the agenda for organizational purposes. In addition, at the prerogative of the chair, once again, the rules of procedure will be amended from that contained in the ordinance. The ordinance states that the applicant has 10 minutes to make the case on his behalf. The opposition has 10 minutes to come up with the reasons that they find that the ordinance that the item should not be approved. And then the applicant has 3 minutes for rebuttal. The rules of procedure will be amended on item number 2 tonight to allow, because of the amount of interest in this particular item, there'll be 20 minutes allowed to the applicant to make the case, 20 minutes allowed to the opposition, and the rebuttal will last 5 minutes. Ms. Ashby will keep track of time and will announce when the respective times are up. First item to be heard tonight is actually item number B1 in the agenda. Number 1, Ashley Boulevard. Request second one-year extension of a vested right that expires on June 5th, 2021, pursuant to section 54-962. Vested right is an approved variance under section 54-353 for attached dwelling units, duplexes in an STR, single two-family residential zone district. Mr. Batchelder.
Thank you. So this is an extension of the vested right. So the application was submitted to the city for this extension on May 27th, prior to the expiration of this vested right on June 5th. So we've treated that as in process and consider this to be a request to extend an unexpired vested right. And we recommend approval of this extension. Just to let you know, this is a property that sits between Trad and South Battery on the west side of Ashley Boulevard, zone residential. The building that occupied this property for many years had significant structural issues that had developed, and the BAR allowed the demolition of this building, so it was demolished, and plans were approved to build a new residential development on this property. And this is a copy of the last extension that was approved by the board just about a year ago. So this is the request for the second one-year extension of this vested right. We recommend approval.
City recommends approval. Mr. Batchelder, there have been no changes in the application.
Correct.
No changes in the application. The application was made prior to the expiration date of June 5th.
Correct.
Are there any motions or comments from the board?
Move approval.
Second.
Move approved, Mr. Morris, second by Mr. Down. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Mr. Morris,
Aye.
Mr. Judon,
Aye.
Ms. Grass,
Aye.
Ms. Richards,
Aye.
Ms. Vargas,
Aye.
Mr. Bennett,
Aye.
Robinson votes aye. The motion is unanimously approved. Next item is number 411 Meeting Street. Mr. Bennett will recuse from hearing this item. Request the fourth one-year extension of a vested right that expires on December 31st, 2021, pursuant to section 54-962. Vested right pertains to a special exception granted under section 54-220 on June 7th, 2016, with conditions for a 300-unit accommodation use in an MU2 mixed-use zone district. Mr. Batchelder.
This is an application that concerns a large property on Meeting Street between Mary and Reed. And the request is to extend this vested right that was received back in 2016. Nothing has changed with regard to the ordinance and or the rules allowing this development to proceed. So we recommend approval of this extension.
The city recommends approval. Any comments or motions from the board?
Move approval.
Is there a
Second.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye. Mr. Morrison,
Aye.
Mr. Judon,
Aye.
Ms. Grass,
Aye.
Ms. Richards,
Aye.
Ms. Vargas.
Aye.
Mr. Bennett has recused. Mr. Robinson votes aye. The motion is unanimously approved. Item number 3 is 19 Haygood Avenue. Request the second one-year extension of a vested right that expires on July 17, 2021, pursuant to section 54-962. Vested right pertains to a special exception granted under section 54-220 on July 17, 2018, with conditions for a 250-unit accommodations use in the MU2/WH mixed use 2 workforce housing zone district. Mr. Batchelder.
So again, we've got a vested right that expired on July 17th. However, the application to extend this vested right was submitted to the city on June 11th. And so we view that as in process. And this is a request to extend an unexpired vested right. And the property is just north of Spring Street off Haygood. And this is a view of the property, just to refresh your memory. And this is the copy of the board's approval of the last one-year extension back in June of last year. So we recommend approval of this extension.
City recommends approval. Once again, Mr. Batchelder, there have been no changes in the application or the property.
Correct.
Mr. Judon moves for approval, seconded by Ms. Grass. All in favor signify by saying aye. Mr. Morrison,
Aye.
Mr. Judon,
Aye.
Ms. Grass,
Aye.
Ms. Richards,
Aye.
Ms. Vargas,
Aye.
Mr. Bennett,
Aye.
Mr. Robinson votes aye. The motion is unanimously approved. Next item on the agenda is 246 Spring Street. Requests the fourth one-year extension of a vested right that expires on December 31st, 2021, pursuant to section 54-962. Vested right pertains to a special exception granted under section 54-220 on December 18th, 2012, for 125-unit accommodations use in MU2/WH mixed use 2 workforce housing zone district. Mr. Batchelder.
This is a property that's located on Spring Street, just west of Haygood Avenue. And the accommodations use was approved a number of years ago, but still a valid vested right that applies. So we recommend approval of this request to extend this vested right for one more year. And nothing has changed with regard to the rules that would prevent this vested right from being approved.
City recommends approval. Moved by Ms. Grass, seconded by Ms. Richards. All in favor signify by saying aye. Mr. Morrison,
Aye.
Mr. Judon,
Aye.
Ms. Grass,
Aye.
Ms. Richards,
Aye.
Ms. Vargas,
Aye.
Mr. Bennett,
Aye.
Mr. Robinson votes aye, and the motion is unanimously approved. Next item on the agenda is 317 Savannah Highway. Request the fourth one-year extension of a vested right expires on December 4th, 2021 pursuant to section 54-962. Vested right pertains to special exception granted under 54-220 on December 4th, 2007 for a 150 unit accommodations use in a GBA General Business Accommodation Zone District. Mr. Batchelder.
Again, another accommodations use approved. This one is located just west of the Ashley, next to the Round Holiday Inn. It's the property shown here, and the request is still valid. Nothing has changed with regard to the rules that would affect this extension. And here's the last extension that was approved back in June of last year. And we recommend approval of this fourth one-year extension.
City recommends for approval. Moved by Ms. Vargas, seconded by Mr. Bennett. All in favor signify by saying aye. Mr. Morrison,
Aye.
Mr. Judon,
Aye.
Ms. Grass,
Aye.
Ms. Richards,
Aye.
Vargas,
Aye.
Mr. Bennett,
Aye.
Mr. Robinson votes aye. The motion is unanimously approved. Next item on the agenda, 235 East Bay Street, 36 North Market Street, and 5 Ginnard Street. Request the third one-year extension of a vested right that expires on July 18th, 2021, pursuant to section 54-962. Vested right pertains to a special exception granted under section 54-220 on July 18th, 2017, with conditions for a 50-unit accommodation use in a GBA General Business Accommodation Zone District. Mr. Batchelder.
This property is located on North Market Street and East Bay Street. The map shows it here. And then here's an aerial view. It includes 36 North Market Street and the parking lot behind it. And the last approval was granted about a year ago. And this application to extend the vested right was received by the city on June 11th. So again, it was received by the city prior to the expiration. So we consider that to be a request to extend an unexpired vested right. And we recommend approval of this third extension, one-year extension of this vested right.
City recommends approval, and that approval was with conditions. Mr.
Right, and the conditions would carry forward.
Okay. City recommends approval. Move for approval by Mr. Bennett, seconded by Mr. Morrison. All in favor signify by saying aye. Mr. Morrison,
Aye.
Mr. Judon,
Aye.
Ms. Grass,
Aye.
Ms. Richards,
Aye.
Ms. Vargas,
Aye.
Mr. Bennett,
Aye.
Mr. Robinson votes aye. The motion is unanimously approved. Next item on the agenda, 16 Broughton, has been deferred. Next item is 1708 Battery Island Drive. Request a variance from section 54-824 to allow a subdivision to create 4 lots and to allow lot 2, lot 3, and residual tract to not have frontage on a public right-of-way. Request a variance from section 54-301 to allow lot 1 having a 10.9-foot rear setback and a 12.49-foot west side setback, 25 feet and 15 feet required. Request a variance from section 54-301 to allow lot 2 with a 10.9-foot front setback, a 58.07 total front and rear setback, 50 feet and 75 feet required, zone RR1. Mr. Batchelder.
So just a brief note, on most of these applications that we're going to have from this one on through the end of the new applications, I've pulled out a few slides and tried to create a brief explanation, brief presentation to explain the application and give my recommendation. And in nearly all of these cases, we have letters of support from neighbors. And so I don't think any of them will take very long, but I want to give you the basic information that I think you need to be able to make an informed decision. So I'm attempting to do that. If we need to go beyond that, we've got additional slides and the applicant can go through them if you would like, but I'm going to try and keep each one of these brief and to the point. So this is the first one, this new application. And this is a property on James Island, southern part of James Island. It's shown here. And right away, you're going to see that it is very unusual shape, very narrow compared to its depth. I think the depth is over 1,000 feet, just to give you an idea. So very unusual. And the request is to allow the subdivision of this property. There are already multiple houses up towards the front of the property, but they're all on one lot of record. And the family that owns this property would like to subdivide it so that each one of those, each home, the occupant of each home can have their own lot and be responsible for their own maintenance and taxes and all that sort of thing. And you'll notice here that this is an unusually deep lot, but there are other lots that are very deep. You can see, let me turn my cursor on here, laser pointer. So you can see right over here, these are properties that are within the city, and similar types of subdivisions have occurred on these properties because, again, these are properties that have been passed on through the same family for many years, and in order to allow those owners of these properties to retain their own home, these have been subdivided, or their own property. Again, on the other side of Folly Road, you can see some of these properties as well where we've done this. So this is not an unusual request in that regard. And this is the overall plat that was submitted to show the proposed subdivision. And this is a blow up of that. So the front part of the lot is where you have the 3 homes that exist today. So they're going to create lot 1 for this house, and then lot 2 for this house, and lot 3, and there'll be a shared easement for access to each one of these lots. But this is obviously a situation, it's unusual, exceptional, extraordinary, and the homeowners here, the owners of the property, have submitted a letter to explain that each one of these homes was built at different times. The front house, 1942, second house, 1950, third house built around 1971, and been in the Backman family for many years, many decades actually, and they just want to have each one of the occupants own their own home. So that makes perfect sense, and we've supported these in the request in the past, and the board has approved them. And so we recommend approval of this request to allow the subdivision to occur and the property lines to create these situations where we have setbacks in some cases that are less than the prescribed setbacks for this zoning district. And then the back portion of the property, this very large piece back here, which does contain some wetlands, would just be a residual tract. So that is our recommendation, and there is nobody that has signed up in opposition to this request.
City recommends for approval, and there is no opposition. Mr. Bennett moves for approval, seconded by Mr. Morrison. All in favor signify by saying aye. Mr. Morrison,
Aye.
Mr. Judon,
Aye.
Ms. Grass,
Aye.
Ms. Richards,
Aye.
Vargas,
Aye.
Mr. Bennett,
Aye.
Mr. Robinson votes aye. The motion is unanimously approved. Next item on the agenda is number 12 King Street. Ms. Richards will recuse from this item. Request special exception under section 54-110 to allow a one-story porch addition that extends a non-conforming 1.5 foot north side setback 3 feet required. Request a variance from section 54-301 to allow a one-story porch addition, stair, landing, having a 56% lot occupancy. 35% limitation, existing lot occupancy 51.4, zone SR4. Mr. Batchelder.
We'll see here that this property is located on the southwest corner of Lamble and King Street. House faces King Street. Here's the zoning map showing the footprint of the house on the lot. Here's an aerial view showing that house. And the proposal is to build a porch addition on the front of the house and redo the front stoop. So there is no porch, and these photographs show the existing condition. No porch, there's a stoop, and they'd like to modify that. And so these plans show the proposed changes, covered porch addition on the front of the existing house, and the revised stair and landing to provide access to the front door. The elevations are shown here. So existing is on the left. You see the existing front landing and the steps that come down to the side. Those would be taken down and replaced by the new landing and stairs. And then the porch addition is shown here. So it really doesn't necessarily directly impact any neighboring property. You've got the street to the north, you've got the King Street in front. And so that is the proposal. And we recommend approval of this request. And the applicant did provide a letter from Jamie McDonald and Rita Carty McDonald, who live at 16 King Street, which is directly adjacent to the property. They say that they are in full support of this request. And also Helen Appleby and Dr. Michael Johnson of 24 King Street, which is close to the property, also have written a letter in support of this request. And so we are supportive of this request. It's a very minor change. Certainly we'll have to go through the VAR, but we support this request.
City recommends approval, and there's no opposition, Mr. Batchelder.
Correct. There's no opposition.
Mr. Morrison moves for approval, seconded by Mr. Judon. All in favor signify by saying aye. Mr. Morrison,
Aye.
Mr. Judon,
Aye.
Ms. Grass,
Aye.
Ms. Richards. Oh, she recused. Sorry. Ms. Vargas,
Aye.
Mr. Bennett,
Aye.
Mr. Robinson also votes aye. The motion is unanimously approved. Next item on the agenda, 75 South Battery, Charlestown. Request special exception under section 54-110 to allow an addition, master bedroom addition, to a non-conforming building footprint that does not meet the required 9-foot side setback, 4.8 feet existing, zone SR2. Mr. Batchelder.
Here's the location of the property on South Battery, just west of Glenwood. Zoning map for the property and photographs of the views of the property from different sides. And I'll just point out in this one. So the addition is a second floor addition over an existing one-story part of the house. And it's right in this area to the back of the main house. Here on the site plan, you see I've highlighted the location of that second floor addition. So it's basically a vertical extension of this building footprint, and the footprint of the house is 4.8 feet off of that west or east side property line. So that's the request, the special exception request. The existing back of the house looks like this, one-story addition you see. And this is the proposed east elevation with that second floor addition added. And these are letters of support. So 17 Lenwood Boulevard. This is the most affected neighbor on the east side of 75 South Battery. Then we've got 77 South Battery, the neighbor to the west, indicated their support or no objections. And the neighbor to the rear at 30 Murray Boulevard also states no objection. So our recommendation is for approval of this request. We feel that it meets the special exception requirements.
City recommends approval and there is no opposition. Mr. Judon moves for approval, seconded by Ms. Grass. All in favor signify by saying aye. Mr. Morrison,
Aye.
Mr. Judon,
Aye.
Ms. Grass,
Aye.
Ms. Richards,
Aye.
Ms. Vargas,
Aye.
Mr. Bennett,
Aye.
Mr. Robinson votes aye. The motion is unanimously approved. Next item on the agenda is 99 South Battery, Charlestown. Request variance from section 54-301 to allow an HVAC platform for a generator with a 3-foot west side setback, 9 feet required, zoned SR2. Mr. Batchelder.
Another residence on South Battery. This one is a little bit further west, just west of Limehouse Street. And another view of the zoning map here, aerial view of the property, and the proposed generator platform, which has to be, the elevator has to be elevated quite a bit for flood zone FEMA purposes. And the platform will be located over here in this area, and will be, according to the, well, this is a view of the elevation showing the height, which would be a total of like 9 feet, 9.5 feet to the top of the platform. But the location is has been confirmed by the contractor or the person with the application to be at least 3 feet off the west side property line. And it would be in the location where this red dot is located. So that is the request. The applicants reached out to the neighbor on that west side of the property, Peter Mistad, and he indicates in his response that he's fine with it. So there's no objections. We have not received any objections from anybody, and we support this request.
City recommends approval. Ms. Grass moves for approval, seconded by Ms. Richards. All in favor signify by saying aye. Mr. Morrison,
Aye.
Mr. Judon,
Aye.
Ms. Grass,
Aye.
Richards,
Aye.
Ms. Vargas,
Aye.
Mr. Bennett,
Aye.
Mr. Robinson votes aye. The motion is unanimously approved. Next item on the agenda is number 91 Spring Street, Cannonboro Elliott.
Mr. Robinson, I
Yes, ma'am.
apologize. I need to be recused from this one. I apologize.
On Spring Street,
Yes, thank you.
very good.
Okay.
Ms. Grass recuses from 91 Spring Street. Cannonboro Elliott Borough request variance from section 54-301 to allow construction of a building with a 3.2-foot west side setback 9 feet required, zone LB.
This is a property on the south side of Spring Street and west of Cumming Street. It is a large property, as you can see on this map. It contains a building on the east side of the property and one at the very back. And the proposal is to construct another building in this area right here where I'm highlighting with my laser pointer. And you also notice that 93 Spring Street is hugging that west side property line. So there's already a building that's directly in front of this proposed building location that would block its view from the street. And so this site plan shows what would be allowed if they met the setback requirement on the left-hand side. And on the right-hand side, the site plan shows what they're requesting, which is a smaller west side setback of 3 feet. Again, the building in the front is right along that west side property line. And this is a kind of designed to kind of be a sister building to that, even though it won't be on the same property, but it would be lining up with that building, let's just say. So they've drawn that line here, that dashed line that extends back just to show that. It still has to go through the BAR and be approved by the BAR. But anyway, that's the request. They have obtained a letter, this letter right here, from George Seago, who owns the property to the rear on Cannon Street, 68 and 70 Cannon Street. And he indicates that he supports the request in this letter. And I'm told that there is a letter from the neighborhood association. I don't think I have that, but there's a letter from the neighborhood association indicating that they're fine with this from Marion Hawkins. Is that correct, Penny?
Yes, Mr. Batchelder, there's a letter of support from Marion Hawkins.
So we have letters of support from the neighborhood association as well as a neighbor to the back of the property. And there's been no indication from anybody that they object to this request. So we recommend approval of this request.
They recommends approval and there is no opposition. Ms. Richards moves for approval, seconded by Ms. Vargas. Vargas, all in favor signify by saying aye. Mr. Morrison,
Aye.
Mr. Judon,
Aye.
Ms. Richards,
Aye.
Ms. Vargas,
Aye.
Mr. Bennett,
Aye.
Mr. Robinson votes aye. The motion is unanimously approved. Next item on the agenda is 974 Ashley Avenue, Wagner Terrace. Request a special exception under section 54-110 to allow construction of a single-family residence that extends a non-conforming 6-foot north side setback 9 feet required, zone SR2. Mr. Batchelder.
This is in Wagner Terrace, just south of San Souci Street on Ashley Avenue. And the property, you can see on the zoning map, it contains 2 buildings. They sit well back from Ashley Avenue. It's very unusual in that regard. And here's an aerial view. So this is a garage. The smaller building in the back corner is a garage. And then there's this larger building that contains a residential dwelling unit, but unusual in that it sits so far back from the street. I'm not sure what the history is of that, but they would like to demolish that building and build a new house up front that would be more in keeping with the streetscape of that area of the neighborhood. And in order to accomplish that, they would like to basically use the same north side setback that the existing house back there, which shown in this photograph has, which is 6 feet off that north side property line. It's actually, the existing building actually has a corner that's as close as 5.4 feet, but the applicant is requesting a 6-foot north side setback instead of a 9-foot setback. And if they, this photograph with this yellow tape shows the south side of the proposed house using this 6-foot north side setback if you approve the request. So as you can see, that will provide plenty of room, about 11 feet between this house and the property line over here next to the neighboring house for a driveway, and which is a very comfortable width for a driveway. If they did not receive this variance and place the house on the lot with a 9-foot setback, that would basically shift the house over so that the south side of the house would be on the inside of this driveway runner, which would not allow for the driveway in the off-street parking required. So in keeping with the pattern of development in that area of Wagner Terrace, where homes typically are situated close to the north side property line and have their driveways or wider yard on the south side, they are proposing to do that here with the house that you see here. And if I go back to this view, you can see that, for instance, 968 Ashley is located close to their side property line, 972 very close to the side property line of that lot. So that's very typical of that neighborhood. And then this is the 2-story house that they would like to build in that location. So we feel that they have a valid case for the special exception. We're not aware of any objections or concerns from any of the neighboring property owners. And we support this request. We don't feel that it will adversely affect neighboring properties. So that is our proposal, and nobody has signed up to speak or expressed any opposition. Is that correct, Penny?
That is correct.
Thank you.
City recommends approval and there is no opposition. Ms. Vargas moves for approval, seconded by Mr. Bennett. All in favor signify by saying aye. Mr. Morrison,
Aye.
Mr. Judon,
Aye.
Ms. Grass,
Aye.
Ms. Richards,
Aye.
Ms. Vargas,
Aye.
Mr. Bennett.
Aye.
Mr. Robinson votes aye. The motion is unanimously approved. Next item on the agenda is 301 Ashley Avenue, West Side. Request variance after the fact from section 54-301 to allow deck gazebo addition with a 1.5-foot west side setback, 7 feet required, zone DR2F. Mr. Batchel.
So this is a residential property, west side neighborhood, right on the corner of Fishburne and Ashley Avenue. And house addresses Ashley Avenue. So the backyard is to the west of the property. And this is a zoning map just showing the zoning of the property and the neighboring properties. Also, you'll note that the neighboring house is right up on the side, basically their side property line or the rear property line of 301 Ashley. Here's another aerial view, and you see there's a very large tree in the backyard here. And what has happened is that the applicant, the owner of the property, has constructed a deck and gazebo in back of the house without any permits. So that's the after the fact nature of this request. So these are the conditions at the back of the house. Is that large tree, and it has damaged the slab and created other issues. So the applicant is attempting to provide a rear deck, and the building you see in this image, that's the neighboring property on Fishburne Street. But you see that the damage that the deck or the tree has caused with the existing patio. So they're trying to come up with a way to work around that tree. And here are some more photographs. So they've constructed a deck here, elevating the basically the patio surface above the ground so that they can work around the roots and protect that tree. And then this is a view that kind of shows you what this actual setback requirement would be, 3 feet for this zoning district versus what they've actually built. And this building right here is the Fishburne Street house, 193 Fishburne Street. So it's really close to that house, and but not a huge encroachment into the required rear setback. So the deck is shown here, extends from the house all the way to the back of the property. And then this, at the very back, they've constructed this gazebo structure, which when I look at this, I mean, I get concerned because it doesn't look like something I would ever support. And I'm concerned about that. However, the applicant has obtained letters from the neighboring property owners indicating that they're fine with this. And another view looking from Fishburne Street at the deck and gazebo up against that neighboring house. And more views here. So these are all of the slides that were submitted by the applicant. I just felt like we needed to go through everything for this one. And then a site plan survey that just shows what they've actually built relative to property lines. And these are the neighboring property owners. This is the neighbor to the south on Ashley Avenue, 297 Avenue, Conner McCann. And this is the neighbor at 193 Fishburne Street, the owner of the neighboring house where that gazebo is located. And he indicates in this signed letter that he has been informed of and approves the proposed plans to build this residential deck in the backyard. So it is only a deck and not a very tall deck, and then a gazebo. The gazebo concerns me, but this owner is indicating that he's fine with it. And I guess as long as it's truly a gazebo and not some enclosed structure, that's fine. Maybe it's going to be an open kind of trellis type structure back there. Maybe that's fine, but anyway, that is the request, and the variance on the back should be 3 feet, not 7 feet. That's listed on the agenda, but so that concerns me a little bit, but I will defer to the board on this. I'm not crazy about supporting it, but with the neighbors being in support, I'm not necessarily opposed to it either.
Mr. Batchelder, I have a question, if it's all right, Mr. Robinson. If it's looking back at the two letters signed by the neighbors, the description in those letters doesn't mention a gazebo or a vertical structure, are we, so far as I can see, if they're both worded the same, they seem to address the horizontal dimensions and where it would be. Are we certain that those two who signed those are aware of the gazebo being part of the construction?
No, we are not certain about that.
Are you, I have a second question. Your equivocation about this, does it relate to the gazebo portion of this more than the decking, horizontal decking part? Or is it both?
Well, it relates more to the gazebo part of this than the deck, I would say. And I believe the applicant is on the line if we want to ask.
I have
him.
one other question, Lee. Would that not be also something that would need to go to the BAR?
No, this is not within the BAR's area of jurisdiction for new construction.
A question too about the letters. Is the letter from the property owner that's most impacted by this structure? Is that the owner or is it the person that lives in the house?
Mr. Batchelder, I can answer that. Both of those letters, I double checked Charleston County records. They showed those persons as the owners
Okay,
of
thanks,
those two properties.
thanks, Penny.
I have a question. When were the letters written? I didn't pay attention to the dates.
May 25th.
Okay.
May
And was that
26th.
structure up prior to that? Do you know?
Well, let's see, the application was submitted to us when, I guess, mid-June. So I'm not sure. I can't answer that.
Hmm.
And
Bill, what was your final recommendation?
well, I think the board is raising some valid questions and the applicant is in the meeting and I could certainly promote them to be an attendee and they can make their presentation to the board. Probably worth hearing from the applicant, I think.
Would like to hear the presentation by the applicant?
Yes, please, I would.
Yes, so would I.
Please, Mr. Batchelder.
I've tried to do that. Trying to promote Mr. Gerhard to be a panelist. Hold on just 1 second. Okay, we're going to, did it work?
Hello?
Hello, is this Mr. Gerhard? Yes. I need to swear you in. Do you swear to tell
Yes,
the
sir.
truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, sir. I
So
swear.
the owner of the property is on, if you'd like to go ahead and make your presentation to the board.
Yes, thank you for the time. I was writing down those questions that came in, but if I missed one, welcome the opportunity to revisit. To the first question is, does the owner know that of the vertical structure and the gazebo? Absolutely, yes. I received my stop work order in July of last year, and I waited until, at the time, the previous owners were trying to sell the house. And so I haven't put a screw into it since over a year now. And I waited until the Cassians bought the house because I knew that they were the ones with the rightful place to respond since it is close to their house. And so the deck, as you see in the photos right now, was completed to that point in October of last year. And so when they were visiting the house and going through closing and bought it, they saw it immediately, and I've had discussions with them even before ownership. So when they signed this letter in May of this year, it's an acknowledgement of exactly what you see on the screen here today. And I'm happy to go back and do additional, more clear writing if that's not coming through in the letter, but I can say with full confidence that their acceptance letter was in the context of exactly what you see on the screen today.
Any other questions of the applicant?
Well, so the same is true for the owner on the side where the gazebo is?
Yes, ma'am, that is true of both of them. On the Ashley side, Connor McCann, he watched me build the whole thing, and he knows as well that when he signed that letter, he had seen it from its infancy into what you see now. So he is also in full, and again, more than happy to get an updated letters of approval from both of them to make sure that that's explicit and that you guys hear it from them that is explicit.
Mr. Gerhart, is the structure completed in one of these or more of these photos we've seen, or is there still some work to be done?
So there was a question about the roof. The roof is completed, the gazebo. I have absolutely no intention of closing it off. The intent, and I've done like some custom cuts with my saw on those runner boards across the top because I wanted them to have some design on them. So the very top roof structure is complete. The only step that is not completed and would change from what you see on the screen today is to lay the decking boards. So the Trex decking boards. Again, I did not lay those because I received the stop work order and I've waited a year until somebody moved in and I could secure their approval. But the only change from what you see today into its final state would be for me to run the vertical decking boards so that you're not walking on the joists and the blocking, you're actually walking on the deck. And that is truly the only step that would be on addition, just putting on the floor.
Anything else for the applicant?
Mr. Gerhart, I have a question about the proximity of the gazebo to the adjacent building is very close. I just very curious if there's been any consideration for the required fire separation by building code requirements, and if that's been brought up by either the inspector or whoever issued the stop work order.
I have not received any communications to that end. No, sir. The mistake I made was building this, was not getting a permit. Now, full acknowledgement of my guilt there. It's my job as a homeowner to know the rules. It's first time homeowner, so I didn't, but it's my job to. The reason I went back as close as I did is because for when laying each of the beams, which have the concrete underneath them, I dug hole after hole until I could find a line that was not impacted by any of the tree roots. And you can see in some of the previous photos there that, and actually just by chance, where I should have stopped at 3 feet, had I followed the rules. There's a root infrastructure there. So I just went right beyond. Thank you for whoever's scrolling. So admitting I made a mistake, I should have got the permit. Had I gotten that, I would have learned the 3-foot setback rule and could have stopped shy of that. I didn't, but I guess the only point, justification for my wrongdoing was every step of the way, which was mentioned in the beginning, was to protect the tree. And what the previous owners had done is laid concrete and bricks and later asphalt. So it's like 4 different materials and covers, and year over year kept pounding those on. So that was the goal, to get out of that. And then certainly when I'm laying the back line, I continually did everything I could to avoid any impact to that beautiful tree.
Any other questions?
I just wanted to clarify. Well, first of all, I appreciate your protecting the tree. Mr. Batchelder, isn't the setback requirement 7 feet, not 3?
No, this is a rear setback along
Okay.
193 Fishburne. So it's a 3-foot requirement versus the 7 that was advertised.
Okay, oh, gotcha. Thank you.
Anything else?
I'm sorry, I do have one other question. Is the building permit pending approval by BZA, or is that is there one more step in the process before he would be able to receive a permit on this project?
That's a good question, and this would be the first step, and they'll still have to go through the process of getting that permit from inspections office.
Anything else? Is anyone else present who wishes to speak on behalf of this project, this application?
No,
Anyone in
Mr.
opposition?
Robertson, but
Anyone
there
in
is,
opposition?
but we have a communication from a member of the West Side Neighborhood Association opposed.
And we hear, Ms. Ashley, what the reason for the opposition is? If you
Yes,
have-
this is from a Marcus Williams, who is on the board for the West Side Neighborhood Association. He's like a block captain is what he said is his position, liaison. I actually spoke to him today, and it's also my understanding he came into the permit center. So he signed up in our Innovate database to say that the West Side neighborhood is in opposition to this after the fact request for this deck gazebo addition.
Mr. Gerhart, I take it that you did not go before the neighborhood association for their feelings on this.
No, I had sent I tried to reach out to George, who I believe is the head of it. Haven't had an opportunity to hear back from him yet. So short answer, no, sir.
So Ms. Ashby, is the letter from the gentleman you mentioned, is he purporting to speak for the West Side neighborhood based on a consideration by their board as a whole, or is he saying he's a block captain and happens to be on the board? I mean, is it clear?
The communication that we have, Mr. Howe, is him signing up saying he just wanted the city and the board to know that the neighborhood is in opposition. He did not wish to speak. There's a neighborhood meeting, I believe this week, and this will be brought to the attention before the full body of the neighborhood association. He just wanted to go on record to state that they are not in support of this application.
Ms. Ashby, did he say why they're not in support?
if a conversation is permissible, he stated to me he could not understand why we would consider an application that was after the fact. If there wasn't a permit issue, then why are we hearing it? That was the gist of the conversation.
Well, the answer to that is the property owner has a right to make such an application.
Yes, sir.
It's
And
our
I stated
position
that.
to make a determination as to what we think the proper course of action is at this juncture. And typically what we do is if someone comes in even before the fact and they make an application for some sort of change to their property, we ask if they have contacted the neighborhood association. That's before they've lifted a finger on the project. And if they haven't, generally what we do is defer the application until they've had an opportunity to talk to the neighborhood association. Any other questions for the applicant? Any other comments or motions from the board?
Were you
Correct.
suggesting?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, were you suggesting, Mr. Robinson, that perhaps that's the course of action we should take on this one as well?
I think it's a consideration the board can make.
Well, I'll
this
make a
is
motion
Stephen
for,
again.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just wonder if I could ask just a clarifying question.
Yeah,
Is the,
your time is up, sir. We're discussing this among board members only.
I make a motion that we defer
Is there a
until
second?
they're,
I'll second that motion.
Is there any more discussion among the board members that wish to bring up?
And just point of clarification, that's to ask the applicant to go speak with the neighborhood association.
correct.
Right, okay, thank you.
Any more discussion among the board members? All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Mr. Morrison,
Aye.
Mr. Jadon,
Aye.
Ms. Grass,
Aye.
Ms. Richards,
Aye.
Ms. Vargas,
Aye.
Mr. Bennett.
Aye.
Mr. Robinson votes aye. The motion is unanimously approved. Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is 22 Savage Street, Charlestown. Request variance from section 54.301 to allow construction of a garage storage building with a 0.8 foot rear setback and a 0.75 foot west side setback, 25 feet and 9 feet required, zone DR 1F. Mr. Batchelor.
22 Savage is a residential property located between Trad and Broad, shown here on this map. Here you see the home situated at the front of the property. And the backyard where there's a car parked is where they would like to add a one-car garage. That is the request before you tonight. And this site plan shows the location and size of that one-car garage with a small storage building off to the side. And would be 0.8 feet from the rear property line and 0.75 feet from the west side property line, or actually that'd be, west side property line. So that is the request before you tonight. These are just plan views and roof plan of the proposed one-story building, and the elevations are shown here. And the applicant has provided letters from all of the neighboring property owners indicating that they They agree that the proposed garage will not impact their property negatively. This is the homeowner at 24 Savage Street. This is the homeowner at 20 Savage Street. And to the rear, this is the homeowner at 7 New Street. All basically agreeing that they have no objections basically to this request. So, and another letter from 9 New Street, owner at 9 New Street. So all the neighboring property owners indicate that they're not opposed to this request. And again, it's a very tight lot and very small proposed building at the back of this property. And some other properties in this immediate area do have small accessory buildings in their back corners and don't meet the more typical 3-foot setback because of the small size of these lots. So we recommend approval of this request, this very small building.
City recommends approval and there's no opposition.
There's no opposition.
Mr. Bennett moves for approval, seconded by Mr. Morrison. All in favor signify by saying aye. Mr. Morrison,
Aye.
Mr. Judon,
Aye.
Ms. Grass,
Aye.
Ms. Richards,
Aye.
Ms. Vargas,
Aye.
Mr. Bennett,
Aye.
Mr. Robinson votes aye. The motion is unanimously approved. Next item on the agenda, 550 Rutledge Avenue, has been withdrawn. Next is 19 Logan Street, Charlestown. Request a special exception under section 54-110 to allow a horizontal expansion, kitchen expansion, and a vertical extension, bedroom bath, that extends a non-conforming 0-foot north side setback, 3 feet required. Request a variance from section 54-301 to allow an addition with a 1-foot rear setback, 25 feet required, zone DR1F. Mr. Batchel.
Residential property south of Broad on Logan Street. And you can see it has a very unusual rear property line because of New Street, the diagonal street behind Logan Street being creating that situation with the lots on New Street. So we have a house that sits right at the front of the property, and this is a proposal to build a rear addition onto that house. The rear property line is that diagonal property line. So you have a very shallow yard on the north side and a very deep yard on the south side, I guess, because of that. And with the house being on the north side of the property, that creates a very tight situation. So this is an application of description, explanation. Here's the house in question. And you see on the right-hand side, the view of the back of the house, 2-story house. And here on the left-hand side is the existing footprint of the house and the proposed footprint. So the shaded area back here, that is the proposed addition to the rear of the existing house. And as you can see, this corner on the north side of that addition comes very close to the diagonal line at the back of the property, which is, in our opinion, the rear property line. The applicant has drawn with this dashed line here the rear setback prescribed by the zoning, which is 25 feet. So the entire addition is within that rear setback, and that is the reason for the variance request on the addition, on the application or agenda rather. And then you see the special exception listed to extend that non-conforming north side setback along property. And then, so really, the variance is really what trumps everything here because of the fact that the entire addition is within that setback. So the odd shape presents a challenge with building something here. And the applicant has, and this is a two-story addition, by the way. So go through the rest of the slides. Ground floor, proposed ground floor, first floor here. Proposed second floor is shown here. Elevations. So existing on the top, proposed on the bottom. This is the south side view. And then from the north side, the neighbor to the north, probably the most impacted neighbor with this proposal, their view is shown on the bottom with this addition, proposed addition here. And that concludes the applicant's slides. So we do not have anything in writing, but we are told, and Penny can speak to this because she has firsthand knowledge, but we're told that the neighbor to the north is okay with this request. And again, if I go back to this map here, so this neighbor right here, who would be the most impacted with this proposed addition, we're told is okay with this request. And I'm willing to go along with this. The properties, and you can see the house to the north has is deeper, even though it's got an odd shaped property. This lot happens to be seems like the most impacted with the shallow depth compared to other lots further south on New Street. And so what they're requesting seems to be like a reasonable request to me, given that situation. And as long as there's no opposition from that neighbor to the north, who would be the most impacted with light and air impact. So without an objection from anybody, my recommendation is for approval of this request due to the odd shape of this property.
City recommends approval and there's no known opposition.
No opposition, Mr. Robinson.
Mr. Morrison moves for approval, seconded by Mr. Judon. All in favor signify by saying aye. Mr. Morrison,
Aye.
Mr. Judon,
Aye.
Ms. Grass,
Aye.
Ms. Richards,
Aye.
Ms. Vargas,
Aye.
Mr. Bennett,
Aye.
Mr. Robinson votes aye. The motion is unanimously approved. Next item on the agenda, 109 Rutledge Avenue, Charleston Village. Request special exception under section 54-110 to allow an existing 3-dwelling unit non-conforming use to be extended by relocating one unit from the main house to the carriage house at the back of the property, zone STR. Mr. Batchel.
So this is a unusual property that driven by so many times, but I'd never really noticed, and I know why now, because it's really a property that has suffered from really unfortunate alterations over the years. And zone residential in Charleston Village, just north of Bull Street. And on that corner of Rutledge and Bull is a corner store building. Dry cleaners are located there, been there for a long time. And they've got a little parking lot on the north side of that corner store building. And then you've got this property. So it's visible, but what you see isn't very attractive. And so I think that's why I never really paid much attention to it. But this is the property that exists today. What's happened is that the piazzas on this building have been infilled to a great extent and altered, and And then you can see on the back of the property, this view right here of all the stairs and additions and things that have been tacked on to this original historic home. Very unfortunate. And so it's had a rough history, and a new owner has come along, and that new owner would like to make some changes, essentially removing all of this stuff that was added on the back of the house, opening up the piazzas, and restoring this back building, which is in poor condition as well, and making that building, with the alterations that will greatly improve its appearance, making that building the third residential unit. So right now there are 3 units in the main building, and this is just storage, unoccupied space back here. There's no dwelling unit in that back building, but they would like to take the existing building, the main house, convert that into 2 residential units, and move the third unit to this accessory building at the back of the property. That is the reason for this special exception, to allow an extension, basically enlarging the conditioned square footage of the 3 dwelling unit non-conforming use on this property. Plans are shown here. So I've highlighted all of the stuff that comes off, basically, of the main house. That's these landings, and I'm not sure what this thing is back here, stairs, all that stuff comes off. And then there are some things on the accessory building in the back that will be removed as well. And what that does is it opens up the site, the yard, basically, to allow for a better parking scenario, so that all of the required parking, the 5 spaces that are required by the zoning ordinance for 3 dwelling units, all of those spaces will be on the property. Before, there wasn't sufficient room to park that many cars back there, but now there will be, with the changes that are being proposed. And then the other thing is that so this is the back building, and you can see on the bottom the existing floor plans for the first and second floor, and on the top are the proposed floor plans. So all this stuff probably tacked on to the original building back here, all that comes off and it gets restored, and with a nice new covered porch addition on the front behind the front door. And then the main house, existing elevations on the top, and you can see just all this infill stuff that's happened, and crazy stuff that happened over the years. That gets removed. You see the piazza's opened up. There's a room, I think it's back here, somewhere back here, that even goes away completely and gets basically a piazza porch extension in its place. So here's the front elevations existing on the left, proposed on the right. Again, you see all the improvements that they are proposing to make. So they're losing conditioned square footage in the main house by making those changes, and then, of course, adding a little bit more conditioned square footage to the 3 dwelling units by moving that third dwelling unit into the back building. And Historic Charleston Foundation has an easement on the property, and so they've been very interested in this property. And note that its condition of the property has been an easement violation issue for the foundation for several years. So they're pleased to see this plan moving forward. And April Wood, the representative, has indicated here that the foundation is strongly in support of the request. for a special exception to allow this non-conforming use to be extended in this way. And so that is basically my presentation. I am in support of this request. I think it's a great thing to see this home restored and see the changes that the applicant is proposing to make. So, and the best of our knowledge, we're not aware of any objections or concerns. I think that's correct, Penny. You can correct me if I'm wrong.
You're correct.
Okay, thank you. And so anyway, that's the my presentation. Be happy to answer any questions, or if the board has questions, the applicant is present and we can hear from them. But they've got a lot more slides. If you want to see anything or want me to go back to anything, let me know.
City recommends approval. Does the board have any questions?
I think it looks great. I move for approval.
Second,
Move for approval and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye. Mr. Morrison,
aye.
Mr. Judon,
Aye.
Ms. Grass,
Hi.
Ms. Richards,
Aye.
Ms. Vargas,
Aye.
Mr. Bennett,
Aye.
Mr. Robinson votes aye. The motion is unanimously approved. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is 477 Lasagne Street, Daniel Island. Request variance from section 54-263, Daniel Island Master Plan, zoning regulations to allow a garage to meet the frontage requirement on a lot that is 71 feet wide, 80 feet required per section 4.1 parentheses 8, zone DI-R. Mr. Batchel.
So this is a residential lot on the north end of Daniel Island where we have this provision that allows wider lots, 80 feet and wider, to have these garages, side-loaded garages as the front of the property of the house in accordance with the zoning requirements on Daniel Island. Otherwise, you got to have a front porch that's up at the front of the property. So in this case, the applicant has a lot that's a little bit narrower than the minimum of 80 feet, and they would like to do this type of arrangement on their property. So you see in this view from February of this year, you see that the house on the neighboring property, I guess that would be to the west, has a similar type of arrangement. This property, I think, is wide enough so that they could do that by right, where you have a driveway and then a side-loaded garage. And basically, the front of that, the front-facing side of that garage becomes the front of the house for meeting zoning requirements, and that's allowed. The neighboring property over here is also going to build the same type of home where they have a driveway over on this side of the house, and the garage will be situated on this side of the property. So the two neighboring properties are having that arrangement where the side-loaded garage is at the front of the property. This applicant would like to do the same thing on their lot. And this site plan shows what they would like to do. The other thing that this shows is that there's a large tree. This is a 20-inch diameter oak tree, live oak tree at the front. And if you move this house up to the front of the property and provide a driveway or downsize it somewhat and provide a driveway on one side, you're going to have a problem with this tree anyway, trying to save it. And it's not protected by ordinance. They could cut it down, but we want to encourage people to save these healthy live oaks when they can. And 20 inches means it's in the prime of its life. And so they have come up with this plan to locate their garage here with the frontage along the front setback line for the ordinance on Daniel Island. and then work around this tree with their driveway. And this plan has received the approval of the Daniel Island ARB. This is a email response from Mary Stewart Sutton, who is the administrator for that Daniel Island ARB, indicating that they support the auto court design, as they call it, to save that 20-inch oak tree. So they've given their blessing. We're not aware of any objections or concerns from anybody else out there. And we support this request because of that tree primarily, but also we think it's a reasonable request given what's happening on that side of the Sane Street in this immediate area. So we recommend approval.
City recommends approval and there's no opposition.
No opposition, Mr. Robinson.
Mr. Judon moves for approval, seconded by Ms. Grass. All in favor signify by saying aye. Mr. Morrison,
Aye.
Mr. Judon,
Aye.
Ms. Grass,
Aye.
Ms. Richards,
Aye.
Ms. Vargas,
Aye.
Mr. Bennett.
Aye.
Mr. Robinson votes aye. The motion is unanimously approved. Next item on the agenda is 82.5 Spring Street, Canberra, Elliott Borough. Request a variance from section 54.301 to allow the reestablishment of a duplex use with 1,363 square feet of lot area per dwelling unit, 3,000 square feet required zone limited business. Mr. Batchel.
82.5 Spring Street is located on Spring Street at Ash Street. It's on the corner. It's zone limited business, like all the other properties on Spring Street in that area, both sides of Spring Street. And the zoning map shows that limited business zoning. This is a view of the house that exists today. So back in 1984, when the current owner purchased the property, it was a 2-unit residential property. The owner that bought it in 1984, the current owner, converted it into an office at that time and has used it as an office on both floors since then. But it's still configured as 2 separate units. It just happens to be office units. So when they did that, they put a conforming use in place of what had been basically a non-conforming use because of the small lot size, not allowing enough lot area to meet the 2 residential unit requirement. So they lost the right to that non-conforming use. They're asking for it back. And so the owner has submitted this application to us requesting that. They've given a history of the property, which is quite interesting. House was built in 1885 and has been used as 2 dwelling units throughout its life up until this owner bought it in 1984. And they converted it into office space, but it also has an interesting past in that it was mentioned in the Green Book back in, this is a copy of the 1948 edition of the Green Book, which I never even knew what that was until the movie came out a few years ago, and it was fascinating to learn about that. But this is a 1948 copy, and the Green Book explains itself, what the purpose is, and then goes on to list this particular property as a tourist home that was available to travelers at that time. And it's, as you can see, one of only a few properties that were listed in Charleston at that time. By converting this property back to 2 residential units, it will be able to be used as 2 commercial short-term rental units. meaning that those dwelling units can be rented on a short-term basis. So it, in a sense, would go back to the use that it had many years ago. But this is an interesting chapter of this building's history, and I think it's relevant for this request because the building is configured, and the applicant states this, the walls on the interior are the same walls. No changes have been made to those walls since they bought it in 1984. So it still has a downstairs separate entrance to that downstairs space, and upstairs there's access through those stairs from the front, and there's a kitchen apparently upstairs, but there's not one maybe on the ground floor, but that would be reinstalled as it's converted back to 2 residential units. But the same configuration, the same 2 units exist in this building today. It was not altered in its conversion from 2 dwelling units to 2 office units back in the 80s. And photographs showing the existing property and interior views of the rooms and fireplaces all still exist. And so our recommendation is for approval of this request, and it's in keeping with how we view these other situations in the past, typically where residential property, and LB allows residential use, it just simply doesn't have the lot area to meet the minimum requirement for 2 dwelling units. So because of that, they need this approval from the board. But this is how we viewed similar requests in the past. And we feel that this is consistent with those. And again, the interesting history that this property has, I think, further bolsters the argument about allowing this property to revert back to a duplex. And this is a letter from Marion Hawkins, who is the president of the Canberra Neighborhood Association, indicating that they voted on this property to support this request. So with that, and I'd also have letters of support from the 2 neighboring property owners to Ash Street, indicating that they're in favor, and also the owners of 93 Spring Street are in favor as well. So we recommend approval of this request, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. And those are all the applicant's slides. I just went through everything. So I thought you'd be interested to see all that. So
City recommends approval. Ms. Ashby, is there any opposition?
No, Mr. Robinson, no opposition.
Ms. Grass moves for approval, seconded by Ms. Richards. All in favor signify by saying aye. Mr. Morrison,
Aye.
Mr. Jadon,
Aye.
Ms. Grass,
Aye.
Ms. Richards,
Aye.
Ms. Vargas,
Aye.
Mr. Bennett,
Aye.
Mr. Robinson votes aye. The motion is unanimously approved. The final item on the agenda tonight is number 80 Ashley Avenue. And Mr. Robinson, Mr. Morrison, and Mr. Bennett will recuse. And I'll ask Ms. Vargas to please chair this item on the agenda. And we thank the applicants for bearing with us this long time. And we appreciate your consideration. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson. Okay, agenda item A2 is 80 Ashley Avenue in Charleston Village. The request is a use variance from section 54-203 to allow a cafe with indoor and outdoor patron use areas and garden shop with on-premises consumption of beer, wine, and liquor. Cafe limited hours, Monday to Friday, 7:30 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. Saturday and Sunday, 8 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. Garden store, Monday to Sunday, 10 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. Cafe staff would arrive 1 hour earlier, leave 1 hour later. Alcohol, beer, wine, and liquor sales to be tied to 7:30, 8 a.m. breakfast service. And we also have a request variance from section 54-317 to allow a cafe with indoor and outdoor patron use areas and garden shop with 2 off-street parking spaces. 13 spaces are required, and this is zoned STR. Mr. Batchelder, do you have a presentation?
Yes, I do. Thank you. I'd like to just make a few opening comments as well. And just note for the record that the record of the April 20th meeting of the Board of Zoning Appeals, when you first heard this application, that is a part of the record for this meeting. So all of the information, the testimony, the presentation, the comments that were received at that meeting are still part of the record for this meeting. And all of the comments that were submitted to us prior to that meeting have been forwarded to the board members in advance of this meeting. So you have all that information. And then all of the comments that were received, submitted to the city prior to the noon deadline today for this meeting have been forwarded to all of the board members as well. So you received all those comments. We don't have to go into those at the actual meeting tonight, but those are still part of the record of the hearing on this matter. And so that brings us to the application that was first presented back in April and deferred with the recommendation that the applicant reach out to the immediate neighbors and the neighborhood association and the preservation groups. And they can explain what they've done, but I know that they've done that and had those conversations. And so this is a use variance request, number one. Use variance request should be a very high bar for an applicant to get over in order to receive that approval. State law does allow localities to grant use variances, although it's very unusual. But in Charleston's case, it's not that unusual because we have so many non-conforming properties and unusual situations due to the history of Charleston. So, but a use variance nevertheless is a difficult hurdle to get over. And it does require a 3/4 vote of all members voting and present. In this case, that's a simple majority of the 4 members who were hearing this request. So 3 members make up that. It's actually a 2/3 requirement. So 3/4 is more than 2/3, and so 3 out of 4 is okay in this case. The request is to allow this property, just very briefly to refresh your memory, this property that sits on Ashley Avenue in Wentworth, northeast corner of that intersection, to have a commercial use, a cafe with indoor and outdoor patron use and a garden shop. So this aerial view shows the property. This is a view from February of this year. So this is a new view on our computer we have access to, and thought that would be useful to see. Very clear, very crisp. And with all of the address points noted for the different properties that surround 80 Ashley Avenue. But you can see this is a residential area, and this is the same presentation that I made back in April. This is a residentially zoned area. You'll see the zoning map on the next slide, but all of the surrounding properties that are shown here in this view are residential properties. And back in the 1930 or so, this building that sat on this property, which happened to be a corner store at that time, was torn down. An oil company purchased the property, tore down that building, and built their gas station. And the gas station situation, actually, I guess I'll call that the period of demolition for gas stations in Charleston. That was what really created the push for the city of Charleston to adopt zoning regulation. Prior to 1931, there were no zoning regulations in the city of Charleston. And people come in and tear down buildings. And although it was unusual for somebody to tear down a building, the oil companies saw that as an opportunity to pick corners that they wanted by demolishing the buildings and building their gas station. And so that's what was happening. And this was an unfortunate location for where that did happen. And we ended up with a gas station. Now that apparently there was enough of an outcry that the oil company decided they should do something a little bit special. And so they used some interesting building methods and designs on this gas station to try and make it blend in, but it's nevertheless a one-story building situated in an area of 2-story, 3-story, 4-story buildings, and some really grand residential properties, really amazing historic properties. So the zoning map shows that this property has a single and 2-family residential STR zoning classification, just like the surrounding properties on 4 blocks that surround this location. And that zoning that we have today is consistent with what the city adopted in 1931. This is the 1931 zoning map. And I've highlighted in green the corner of Ashley and Wentworth where this property is located. And you can see that zoning, this cross-hatching indicates B residence district. Back then we had a very simple zoning ordinance, 2 residential districts, 1 business district, and 2 heavy industrial or 2 industrial districts. It's not that way anymore, but this was residential back then. I can only assume that city council was thinking, well, maybe someday that gas station will go away and we'll get a home there. I don't know, who knows what they were thinking, but maybe they didn't want to add a 3rd district to confuse things. Who knows? There's no good information to explain how they came up with these zoning rules, at least that I've found. So that it is what it is. But the proposal is to restore the building that's there and convert it into this cafe and garden shop. And you can see that the main building right here would be the kitchen. And then this area off to the side where you have the bays for the cars to pull into and be worked on, that area would become the retail area where the customers would come, and there would be a bar area where they could order, and seating and bathrooms, that sort of thing. And then some retail display as well. And then outside, you have 2 parking spaces right here. And then this larger area right here would be the outdoor seating area and I guess an outdoor garden area well. And then over here would be outdoor retail and storage of plants. So that is the proposal in a nutshell. And so we've got the use variance for the use with all of these certain hours, which they've revised slightly in their proposal. And then alcohol consisting of beer, wine, liquor would be allowed as part of this operation. And the variance, also a variance is necessary to allow this use with only 2 off-street parking spaces versus the 13 that are required, based on the patron use area for the cafe. So that is the request in a nutshell. I think, again, that the cafe and garden shop idea, shown very schematically in this image right here, is an attractive idea. It finally dawned on me just a few days ago that what's so attractive about this, in addition to the opportunity to come and sit here and have a nice glass of wine and meal, the image of that is what's really attractive. If we still use postcards like we did 30 years ago, this would be a postcard image from Charleston. It would be a beautiful image of a cafe and garden center occupying this historic gas station, a refit of this gas station. And it would be surrounded by these beautiful historic homes. All are restored in excellent condition. It would look beautiful. But the reality of what that use would mean for those surrounding homes is something quite different. And that's what concerns me. Because the reality is that you've got noise and just the overall intensity of use from this kind of thing that just would, I think, adversely affect these neighboring properties. And each one of them have expressed a lot of concerns about the impacts on their properties. And I think that those are valid concerns. And so a use that's going to operate the way they're proposing to operate 7 days a week, 72 and a half hours per week, is a intensive use. And a lot of that activity is outside. So that's unusual. That's unlike most corner stores where 90% of the activity is within a building. But there have been numerous conditions that have been proposed and requested as part of this proposal. And I think that's the numerous concerns that have been proposed speaks to the complexity of this issue. But yes, it's going to create impacts, but somehow we can tame it to make it okay. Well, having all the years of experience that I've had dealing with use variances and conditions and things like that, I know that it's very difficult to stick to these conditions for very long. And it can be a real challenge for us to enforce them at some point in the future when people choose to ignore them. Not that these owners would choose to ignore them, but inevitably these kinds of businesses turn over. They get new staff, they get new, they sell them to other people, and you have new owners, and it gets lost in translation effectively. So I think the fact that people have suggested all these numerous conditions speaks to the intensive nature of this business and the concern that people have over the impact on the adjoining neighbors. So the beer, wine, and liquor, that the liquor especially is troubling to me. So I just feel like this is too intensive use to be suitable for this location. And the 2 homes that are immediately adjacent overlook this property. I mean, they virtually look down on the property. So for all those reasons, I'm still not supportive of this request. I feel it's an attractive image, but the reality is going to be something quite different. And so for that reason, I'm not supportive of this request, and I think the board should deny it. And I'll just leave that as my concluding remark on this, and we can then move on to the applicant. And I know that there's a time limit. We are fully prepared to, I've got a stopwatch here on my phone, and Penny's got one as well, to try and keep track of these time limits. And I do want to say that there are, in addition to the applicants and their attorney, there are people who did sign up to speak in favor. And I would like to try and accommodate some of those people. We won't be able to accommodate all of them, I don't think, in this 20-minute time limit. And then likewise, there are people who signed up to speak in opposition as well. So with that, I'll just open it up to the board and the chair to tell us how they want to proceed.
Mr. Batchelder, the 20 minutes for each side is inclusive of not just the applicant or not just the applicant, but also everyone who's speaking in support. So it's an entire 20-minute block for the pro side and an entire 20-minute block for the opposing side.
Okay.
Within the rebuttal. Okay.
Okay, and I think that's reasonable. I think what I would do is just try and encourage the applicant to wrap up their presentation, to allow for some additional time for the others that want to speak in support to do that, if we can do that in a timely fashion, and for those people to keep their comments very brief, very brief.
Okay.
That's my advice on that.
So I imagine the board would like to hear the presentations from the applicant.
Yes.
Okay.
So we can promote Mr. Barr. I know he's on here. I will do that. Oh, okay. Scott's doing it. Thank you. And he can advise us in his presentation if there are others that he wants to promote as well.
Yes. Oh, and if I may, Mr. Batchelder, I just want to remind everyone that the board members did receive all of the letters and the materials in support and in opposition, and we have taken the time to study those.
Mr. Barr?
Thank you very much. Madam Chairperson, and members of the commission, Mr. Batchelder, it's a pleasure to be back before you.
Should I swear you in first?
Say again?
Should I swear you in?
No, I don't think it's necessary, because I'm about to say, you'll be pleased to know, knowing how long-winded I am, that I will not be making the presentation. Rather, Ms. Brown, the actual applicant, will be making the application. So I would ask that you please admit Ms. Brown and swear her.
Okay, thank you.
So please don't start our clock until then.
Right. So, Ms. Brown, I know you've been promoted. Are you with us?
Yep, I think I'm here. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Very good.
Let
I think
me swear you in first. Let me swear you in before you speak and give your name to the board. But do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
And I think everyone will be pleased, given the volume of time we've spent on the subject, that my comments will be relatively brief. I took the board's direction at heart and really spent the bulk of our time focused on preparing comments to update you on the conversations we've had with supportive neighbors, opposing neighbors, and all of the various organizations across the city. While we took the last 3 months to be doing that, and I apologize, one question. Lee, do you want me to share my screen to walk through the presentation, or do you want me to point you to pages? I'm
If
happy.
I can, I've got the presentation slides in the order that we received them. So I've
Okay.
got them here. I'm happy to do that. If you just want to have me go to the, I can go to this first slide. You'd like to be here or tell me?
Sorry, one second. It's just trying to close out me. Okay. No, you can go forward to the cover page, please, of the presentation.
Mr.
That's
Batchelder, just to be clear, when Ms. Brown starts to speak, that's when her time starts.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm referring to the presentation that I had sent to Penny and you, Lee, after our update conversation earlier this week.
Oh, you mean the images,
the slides.
these slides?
Yes, sir. Yeah. So we spent a lot of time over the last 3 months continuing to work with our operating tenants, both of the cafe and the garden store, to talk about what sort of benefits that this property could bring should we be approved. And I think some of the things that I heard at the last meeting on April 20th was that you'd like some more articulation on a few benefits that the property would bring to the neighborhood. You know, and we have a laundry list of things we'd like to begin to pursue should this be approved and we're allowed to move forward with the restoration and operating of the plan. A number of those things are reaching out to Low Country Grocer and using this as a CSA pickup, working with neighbor to neighbor as a place to have meetings, working with several of the other local organizations, including the Horticultural Society, to host educational benefits. And really, our hope is that this is not just a cafe or garden store, but also a space in which the community and the neighbors can gather and really get to know each other. And we actually view the outdoor area of this property as a tremendous asset. And given the fact that we're living in a pandemic, and I do find it frustrating that we continue to get pushback on the utilization of outdoor space in when we've learned in the past year and a half that being outside is really a good place for us to be and to gather with our neighbors. Further, what you're seeing on your screen right now, we had a local landscape architect volunteer to do some renderings for us, just to help you visualize the degree to which we are trying to create an enclosed garden, secret garden, with tremendous amount of privacy for the neighbors. Lee, if you could advance to a few of the other views, please. Keep going, please. There's a number of views that show the perspective from the adjacent properties, both 84 Ashley and 174 Wentworth. That would be 84 Ashley. So the tree on the right-hand side is actually significantly bigger than what's being depicted here, and you would not even be able to see the cars from 84 Ashley. And we're proposing additional evergreen screening here, so visually you would see very little into this property. And the cafe seats, outside cafe seats, of which there would only be 6 to 7, because we've agreed to limit the number of seating outside, are placed as far as physically possible from all of the adjacent properties. So if you continue, Mr. Batchelder, there's a view from 174 Wentworth that I think is very important to show, because from 174 Wentworth, you literally cannot even see a patron. You can't see the entrance of the building. You can't see anything, any activity going on that corner distanced from that neighboring property. I think there's one more, sir. 2 more, sorry. So there's several, you can see this is the view from 174 Wentworth. And it's an aerial view at that, higher than the building. And so you can't even see activity on the front side of this building from that adjacent neighbor. So I hope that these renderings show the degree to which we're trying to enclose the building, really keep all patron activity to the front corner as far as possible away from any neighbors. And I do want to point out that the continued issue of people being concerned about 20 people outside of this property creating enough noise that it's going to disturb neighbors over 40 feet away is almost laughable. If you just go and stand on this property and try to have a conversation with somebody 2 feet from you, the traffic volume drowns you out. And numerous times during your conversation, you have to stop talking. So you can barely hear each other 2 to 3 feet, let alone hear voices carrying from groups of 2 and no more than 4, 40 feet away to adjacent properties. Plus, if you go back to an aerial view of the property, we are proposing overhead screening that will further mitigate the carrying of any additional noise. And lastly, all this greenscape around this property should improve the overall neighborhood's traffic noise as well. Mr. Batchelder, could you please go to the slide number 2? In that, it's the summation of our conversations with HCF and PSC. Yes, this slide. Yeah, thank you.
2 slide.
So at the at your direction, you asked us to go back to the various organizations and see if compromise could be reached or further protections provided to the neighborhood. We reached out to the Historic Charleston Foundation, the Preservation Society, the Charleston Village Neighborhood Association, and also had meetings with the opposing neighbors in one large group on June 14th at their legal counsel's office. I'll start with that. We met with them under strict confidentiality rules that were insisted upon prior to meeting with us. So there's not much that was said in that meeting that I can share with you, other than no conditions were submitted to us for consideration. Prior to that meeting, we have emails and documentation from direct opposing neighbors saying that they would under no circumstances support a food and beverage operation here. So that sums up the results of our efforts of trying to cooperate, or at least have something to compromise on with the neighbors. There was nothing given to us to reach compromise. We also had conversations with the Charleston Village Neighborhood Association. We had sent the Historic Charleston Foundation and the Preservation Society's suggestions to them, saying, here are examples of things that you come up with. Give us anything, we're willing to compromise, we want your support. And they refused to submit conditions to us ahead of this meeting, and I haven't heard anything since their neighborhood meeting on July 6th. So they also declined to give us things to think about or areas to compromise on. We had more success with both the Historic Charleston Foundation and the Preservation Society. What I'm trying to depict on this page for you is everything in green is a condition that was submitted to us that we are meeting, that we said, yes, we'll do that. And everything in red are conditions that we are not able to accommodate. There's only one, and that was from the Preservation Society, whose condition was in opposition of the foundation's condition. So Foundation wanted us to have the kitchen open, serving food during all working hours, and Preservation Society wanted us to close the kitchen at 3 p.m. We couldn't do both, and so we took the Historic Charleston Foundation's condition in conjunction with the supportive adjacent neighbors who said they would like to have access to a full service kitchen during all opening hours. The only other one that we weren't able to meet 100% is up a little bit, Mr. Batchelder, and that's the skylight. So Preservation Society would like us to eliminate the skylight. If you recall from the previous renderings, we had wanted to do an A-frame greenhouse type glass roof over the garage space. The Preservation Society was concerned that that would create evening light pollution. And so we met with them and said, well, we want to have plants and a greenhouse atmosphere inside the cafe. So if we ensure that the brick parapets are 2 feet tall and we go to a flat roof with 5 skylights and shades, and we close at 6 p.m., you'll have very little evening light pollution. And they thought that was a very good compromise, and we're happy to accept that, which is why it's yellow, because it's not their original request, but they were pleased with our solution. So those are the highlight of the conversations that we have had. We have gone and will continue to go to extreme lengths to try to make this as minimal as possible. You know, having 6 to 7 tables outside as far away from neighbors as possible with no more than 20 people, because that was in a very important condition from the Preservation Society, no more than 20 people on the outside at any given time. We were gathered in that space with the Charleston Village Neighborhood Association. And there were about 20 of us. I think there were 18, about 20 of us. And the 20 of us we had to move into the building to be able to continue our conversation because of the loud traffic noise. So with 20 of us on that corner, we couldn't even hear each other within that small area. So please advance one slide, Mr. Batchelder. Without any conditions submitted to us by the opposing neighbors, we extended one additional olive branch, and that is to reduce the operating hours by 30 minutes every single day. So we close at 6 p.m. instead of 6:30, trying to give people additional time in the evening for complete silence or inactivity around that corner. We continue to try to reach compromise, but when no conditions are submitted to us for compromise, we can only do so much. So I mean, at this time, that's the update that we wanted to share, and that we're submitting to you. And I guess I cede the rest of my time to some of the neighbors who wanted to speak in support, if that's how it works.
Ms. Ashby, how much time do we have remaining?
9 minutes, 18, 17, 16 seconds and counting down.
He's keeping a little bit tighter rein on us because I didn't count the time that I swore
Okay,
Ms. Brown in. So
you want to add about 2 minutes?
Yeah, about 10 minutes. We got about 10 minutes, I think.
Okay, about 10 minutes, okay.
Yeah. So
Do we have anyone signed up to speak in support?
Yes, we do. Ms. Vargas, who has signed up to speak in support is Carolyn Freeman, resident of 48.5 Montague Street. Is Ms. Freeman in the audience?
Scott, if you can find him and let us know if you found him.
Mrs. Freeman.
You can unmute.
Sorry, I could not find a Mrs. Freeman in the
Okay.
attendees.
Next, Penny.
Okay. We have also Erin Minigan with Charleston Preservation Society that signed up to speak.
She's present. You could.
Hi, good evening. Lee, do you need to swear me in?
Yes, I do. Erin, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. My name is Erin Minigan with the Preservation Society of Charleston. The Preservation Society has appreciated the opportunity to engage with the applicant and directly affected neighbors. We were hopeful conversation between the parties would result in an agreeable path forward, and disappointed to learn that did not happen. Our position remains that appropriate neighborhood businesses contribute to a healthy diversity of uses in Charleston's neighborhoods. We work diligently to evaluate each request through the lens of the zoning ordinance to consider potential impacts on adjacent properties and the character of the district. The applicant has committed to reduce negative impacts of its proposed operations, which provide a strong starting place for mitigating negative impacts on adjacent properties. However, we continue to believe that additional measures should be incorporated to ensure better compatibility of the project. To this end, we support this request, provided the board adopt the following additional conditions to defensively approve this use variance. Number 1, ensure deliveries occur during hours of operation. Number 2, incorporate trash and recycling into the interior program or otherwise enclosed to further mitigate odor. Number 3, cap outdoor seating capacity at 20 seats. Number 4, limit party size to 4 on outdoor seating to manage noise. Number 5, limit kitchen to cold food preparation only after 3 p.m. Number 6, clarify closing time at 6 p.m. as we saw differing closing times stated throughout the application. Number 7, introduce further vegetative screening between neighboring properties to the north and the east. And number 8, eliminate nighttime light leakage by removing the proposed glass roof. Thank you.
Okay.
Anyone
Mr.
else?
Batchelder, I have what, 7 minutes left?
Yeah.
The next person that signed up to speak was Winslow Hasty, Historic Charleston Foundation.
Hello?
Hello, Winslow?
Yes, can you hear
Yes.
me?
Yes,
All right.
yes. Let me swear you in.
Okay,
You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
absolutely. Okay, so thank you for this opportunity. I just want to say Historic Charleston Foundation continues to be in support of this variance request for 80 Ashley. We also were hopeful that conversations between the applicant and adjacent neighbors would achieve a compromise solution, but obviously that's not the case. I think y'all have heard all of our arguments about healthy diversity of uses, but I think it's important to point out that both the city's preservation plan as well as the Century 5 plan both recommend a diverse mix of uses for the Lower Peninsula and in particular for Charleston Village. So I think that's very important as a guiding principle here. Obviously, this is a historic purpose-built commercial building built in 1929. It has been vacant for an extremely long time, as we all know. And we finally have what we think a viable proposal that will make this commercial rehabilitation possible. In our minds, the only possible argument against this project would be under the fourth test of the variance test, which relates to substantial detriment. And, it's our assertion that this project actually will improve the character of the district. It involves the rehabilitation of a dilapidated vacant historic building on a prominent corner. It introduces a neighborhood scaled commercial use in a walkable, bikeable neighborhood. It has flood resiliency improvements. They've gone above and beyond on limiting the operations in terms of, time and where they're dealing with trash and all of that. So as far as we're concerned, none of these livability concerns rise to the level of what you would deem a substantial detriment to any of the neighbors. And again, in our minds, the proponents have imposed conditions on the operations to mitigate any potential negative impacts to neighbors. We believe this application presents an appropriately scaled commercial use. Again, diverse mix of uses is very important. And then lastly, I hope that everyone saw a recent article written by Maura Hogan in the Post and Courier that was talking about the importance of corner stores in Charleston and how it's a really integral part of Charleston's culture and history. I think that was a really important article to point out. And respectfully, Historic Charleston Foundation encourages board members to approve this application this evening. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Batchelder, Ms. Vargas, we also have a James Ewing, resident that signed up to speak, that lives at 75 Ashley Avenue.
To speak in support?
In support.
And how much time do we have left?
3 minutes, roughly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
And is there
Mr.
anyone else in addition to?
That is all that I have that has signed up to support this application.
Okay.
Mr. Ewing, are you with us?
I am.
Let me swear you in first before you give your name and address and speak to the board. But first, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Hi, Jamie Ewing, 75 Ashley. We just moved here, but I grew up in Charleston and have been involved with this property as far as driving by it for ages. I remember driving by it when it was a gas station as a child. We are firmly in favor. My family thinks that this would be an asset to the neighborhood. It would basically save a building that has always been a commercial use. It would be a soft impact on the corner. It would reduce flooding issues given the permeability of the apron there and the fact that it is a low site. And it will encourage more foot traffic around here. I think there was a study in 2018 by Harvard Business School on the addition of cafes to neighborhoods that basically showed a 1% to 2% increase in property values when a cafe comes into a residential neighborhood. And there have been other studies that show the same. So I can't say it would be detrimental to my property value either. We plan to be here for 30 plus years, if not longer. We are raising children here. I hope that they can go to this place for ice cream. I hope that who just a substantial amount of work from home, will be able to go get a beer or have a meeting over coffee in the morning. I really don't want to see this building continue to deteriorate. Other commercial uses, I actually have a degree in historic preservation, and I also work professionally as a real estate investor, and office uses just simply aren't viable given the small footprint and low lying nature of the spot. And in the long run, if it becomes a residence, it will crowd out light, and it will become probably yet another 3 or 4 story residence. And I don't want that to happen. So my family and I are firmly in favor. And I'm at 75 Ashley. If I could turn around and look at I'm actually looking at the property right now. And thank you for your time. And I hope the board supports it. Thank you.
Okay. We have people in opposition to speak. Is Mr. Masalan speaking,
Okay.
presenting?
Ms. Vargas, are we starting the next time limit? Because basically
Yes.
we're out of time with the 20
Yes.
minutes for.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so we will start the new time limit of 20 minutes again for the opposition. Okay.
So if we could, okay. Mr. Maslon?
I am here. Can you hear
Let
me?
me swear you in first. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank
And do I have video or just audio?
Just audio,
And if
but I've got your slides here if you'd like me to go back to those.
if I could have just a minute to, I don't believe I've got a video option on mine, just an audio.
Right.
That's all right. Well, I had a couple of screenshots that I'd like to show on my computer. Is there any way you can promote me to a video participant as well, or
They're not part of the slides that you submitted to us?
well, I was just going to use 3 or 4 rather than trying to go through all of them.
Okay.
But if I can't use video, then I will do my best in this format. Madam Chair and members of the board, I'm John Masalan. I'm here on behalf of Mr. and Mrs. Rogers, who live at 84 Ashley, immediately to the north of this property, and Sarah Robertson at 174 Wentworth. If my directions are right, she's immediately to the east of this property. And they are firmly opposed. Since the last meeting in April, not much has changed. The applicant is back seeking two variances to operate a restaurant and bar, which has often been referred to as a garden cafe in the middle of a residential neighborhood, serving a full bar menu, 3 meals a day, 7 days a week, mostly outside on the patio. And our opposition is that this is just the wrong use for this location. And my neighbors are mostly adversely affected by it. And it's a substantial detriment to their property. And we hope you'll deny the application for these reasons. First, I won't go over the variance test for you because I know you all know it well, but on the elements of it, I'd like to point out or remind the board that the applicant has the burden of bringing forward relevant evidence to prove a basis for granting the variance that they seek here. So not just suppositions, not just arguments, not just claims about this operation that can't be substantiated, but actual evidence. On that, they fail. First, as far as the hardship goes, the applicants, as I understand it, claim a hardship primarily because this building is derelict and needs to be renovated. But under the law that's cited in my memorandum submitted prior to the hearing, the applicant is burdened with the same problems that the owner would have if he was here tonight. And it basically is this: someone can't create a situation, then claim it as a hardship and use it as a basis for a variance. And that's what we've got here on two points. First, over the years, the owner has apparently intentionally allowed the building to deteriorate into its current state of disrepair and neglect. And the applicant comes forth and tells us, well, the building can't be used for anything other than this purpose because it needs to be renovated and it's in deplorable condition. But again, that is unfortunate. It is a problem, but it's not a hardship under the test. The same is true of the requested parking variance. The primary reason that the applicants are here seeking a parking variance is because they want to eliminate almost all of the on-site parking to make room for the outdoor space. And so we're going from the required 13 spaces to only 2. And during the last hearing, the renovation plans and the reconstruction plans got a lot of attention. Not much attention was paid to the parking variance, but the use variance application is important, but that parking variance is also. And I believe it was Mr. Jadon that raised the point at the last hearing about where all these people are going to park, where the employee's going to park, where the patron's going to park. And the answer that came from the applicant was at Colonial Lake, which is several blocks away. But that answer really defies logic and common sense. The real answer is that they're going to park as close to this place as they can possibly get, which means that they're going to be parking on the streets of this neighborhood and making an already bad and crowded parking situation worse. We heard some talk last time about the need to renovate this property into a commercial use, because to use it residentially would require it to be raised to meet FEMA standards and really torture the architecture and disrupt the neighborhood. But as I point out in my memo, that argument ignores that there is a process to apply for a FEMA variance. And again, at risk of telling you something you know, the historic structures like this in a historic district that are contributing structures, which I believe this building to be, can apply for a FEMA variance through the Board of Appeals administered by the Building Inspections Division. And if that variance is granted, then whoever renovates this building will not have to bring it up to FEMA standards to turn it into the use it's zoned for, which is residential. And the applicant has said that a FEMA variance can't be granted, but there's no evidence in this record, none at all, that they've applied for one, that they've been denied one, or if they applied for one, it would be denied. So I don't think the board can presume that just because the applicant says it. On the next element of the variance test, the denial of this would not prohibit or unreasonably restrict its use.
again, you've heard talk about the food and beverage being the only option that would allow this building to be renovated. But again, that's just talk. It's not proof. And we haven't seen any evidence from the applicant that other uses can't be made of this building. As I said last time, and I'll repeat briefly, my clients aren't opposed to any use that isn't residential. This use is the problem. This use is just too intense. There was a lot of talk last time, or some talk last time, I don't want to overstate it, about the economics of this. And I believe the representation was made that unless it can be turned into a food and beverage use, the numbers just don't work out. And I think Mr. Ewing also alluded to that in his comments, that office space just would not support this renovation. I take this opportunity to remind you all that under section 629-800 of the code, that can't be the basis for granting a variance. The fact that a more lucrative use is available or could be obtained through a variance is not a basis for granting a variance. I heard a couple of comments about mixed use, and I want to speak to that briefly. First, again, my clients are not opposed to mixed use fundamentally or conceptually. It's this mixed use that's the problem. And if the goal, if the policy here that is being articulated to the board is zoning should be, variances should be granted to allow uses that are not otherwise allowed to encourage mixed use, I think this produces exactly the opposite result. Instead of encouraging real mixed use, what it encourages is behavior like you've seen here, to let a property become derelict and fallen down, and to really encourage most economically lucrative use. And I think if that's the test, then we don't get mixed use. What we get is everything becomes a hotel or restaurant or bar. And that's not mixed use, it's just homogeneous use of a different kind. The neighborhood, as I pointed out last time, and I won't show those slides again, has other uses, offices, dry cleaners, things of that nature that are not as impactful, that would be mixed, true mixed use. And we would encourage that as other options for this building if residential can't be accomplished in some way. Now on to the real problem, which is substantial detriment to the neighboring properties. And we have that here in abundance, unfortunately. You've heard about the conditions the applicant is self-imposed and the conditions suggested by Preservation Society and Historic Charleston. But I think that Mr. Batchelder really puts his finger on it when he says the complexity and the multiplicity of the conditions illustrates why the conditions won't work. They won't protect these folks. We've submitted a map first time, and we resubmitted it showing that all of the opposition for this is in the immediate neighborhood. My folks, both of them live next door. If you remember the map showing the red dots, all of the opposition is concentrated around this property. And it's the kind of property that if you didn't have to live next door to it, people would probably enjoy going to it, just not living by it. And that is the problem. The code addresses adjacent properties first. They should get priority consideration. They are the most important. The supporters that we know of live remotely. They live in other places. They don't live next door to this. They don't have to deal with it every day. A quick summary of what we see are the most important detriments of these. As you've heard, it's an inside-out restaurant. Most of the seating area is outside, and there's been talk of minimizing that by limiting it to 20, limiting it to groups of 4. But again, 20 people outside your house eating and drinking, laughing and talking is not a small number of people. Secondly, even though the capacity is limited outdoors, you heard talk about this being a gathering place, and there's no way for the owner or the operator to ensure that people who can't be seated don't hang around outside and have a glass of wine or a mimosa and drink and talk while they're waiting on the table. As I mentioned at the outset, this restaurant is every day. These people have no time for rest. There's no Sundays off. There's no Mondays off. Every day, people are outside eating and drinking and talking and shopping. As far as the service hours, you heard they offered to reduce them by half an hour to stop at 6 or to at least close at 6. But what we know is we're going to have people coming an hour before the place opens. We're going to have people ordering food at 5:45, servers cleaning up for an hour or so afterwards. So they're going to be people at this restaurant longer than the operating hours. As you heard from Mr. Batchelder, it's a full service bar, which tends to make people even more boisterous than they would otherwise be. And things like light food, food smells, noise, all of these things can be measured, but we have no objective evidence from the applicant about sound studies, light studies, vibration studies. What we have are things like, I stood outside and tried to talk with someone and I couldn't hear them over the traffic noise. But again, that's not evidence. That's not anything this board should or could base a variance on. As far as the distance from my client's properties, the one thing I wish I could show you is earlier today or late yesterday, they, and this might be a picture of it here, Mr. Batchelder may be able to pull it up because I sent it earlier today. They actually used a garden hose to map out an area on this lot that's 45 feet from their homes. And the area that is shown is too small for 20 tables. It would not accommodate the kind of seating that is planned for this, or the seating is going to be much closer to their properties than 45 feet. As far as the parking, again, please don't lose sight of the fact that they are asking to reduce the spaces from 13 to 2. And that is also a part of this variance request that we hope does not get overlooked. Some of the words you've heard in this are pedestrian accessible, but again, these owners, these operators have no control over whether people bike there, walk there, drive there. But experience teaches us that most of them are going to drive there because most of the support you've seen is not from the immediate neighbors. It'd be great if they could control garbage pickup, but the city sets those schedules and they pick it up on their own schedule. As far as deliveries, the same. It's nice to say they should limit deliveries to operating hours, but those companies deliver when they can and when they want to. And there's no control by the owner or operator of that as far as I know. And again, it's not our burden to prove lack of adverse impact. It's the applicant's burden to prove there is no substantial impact and they fail on that. And then finally, just a few words about conditional approval, and then I'll yield the floor to anyone else that would like to speak. The big problem, as I mentioned last time, is that conditional approval essentially deputizes my clients to enforce these regulations. And so they're going to have the choice, if this is approved with conditions, to either police it or to let it go and not enforce it. And you heard, I think it was Mr. Hasty mentioned an editorial that Ms. Hogan wrote a while back about corner stores. But I feel compelled to remind you, this is not a corner store. And it's a restaurant 7 days a week, full bar service. And if you're reading the Post and Courier, I'd encourage you to read an editorial that Scotty and David Hoffman sent in today about a corner store in their neighborhood and how sometimes operating conditions and operators change over time and they are not as responsible and concerned about the neighborhood. And if you approve these variances with conditions, the thing that none of us can control is what happens after that. These variances run with the land. They would apply if the property is sold to another owner, if it's transferred to another operator with a different concept or a different set of operating values. And the thing that I'm sure will happen if this is approved with conditions is this. like in many instances, once it's approved and the neighbors start to complain that conditions aren't being followed, then they're going to get some unflattering names and labels attached to them. And a subsequent owner or a subsequent operator is going to be back in front of this board telling you that they need more lenient conditions because they can't comply with the enforcement obligation that's being put on them. And if that happens, the burden of the neighboring property owners, once the use is reestablished, if it's reestablished, becomes much higher. And then the arguments they're going to hear are, well, we're only talking about another hour in the morning, another hour in the afternoon, another 2 hours in the evening. And again, that's a much more difficult position, and you get mission creep as the process goes along. And again, I think we've seen it here. Initially, as I understood it, the proposal was breakfast and lunch, only cold food after 3. Now, based on some recommendations of one of the groups, it's hot food till 6. And that's even before it's been approved. So I submit to you that no amount of conditions will solve the adverse impacts on these neighboring properties. Finally, the applicant has made much of the fact that this is a variance request and that they have not asked for rezoning. But I'd submit to the board that really this accomplishes the same thing without going through the rigors of the rezoning process. That they're going to get a use variance, which is essentially legally the same thing that they would get if they went through the rezoning process. It's going to run with the land just like the rezoning would, except with no disrespect to this board, the variance process isn't as detailed and rigorous legally as the rezoning process. And for something this important, something this impactful, this board should not consider this as a use variance, should not grant this use variance, and shouldn't grant the parking variance. Thank you very much.
So
Thank you,
moving
Mr.
on,
Batchelder. Go ahead, Mr. Batchelder.
I know that we've got James Wilson who signed up to speak also. So
We don't have much time, Mr. Batchelder.
right,
We're down to 2 minutes.
James.
Sorry, can you hear me okay?
Yes, let me
Great.
swear you in. You
Great.
swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do. I promise to be very brief. Are you ready for me to begin?
Yeah, and we're down
Yes.
to just a few short minutes.
Yes.
3 minutes.
I'll go very quickly. Here we go. I'm James Wilson. I'm here on behalf of the owners, Thad Wilson and Heather Wilson of 171, 173 Wentworth. I'm a lawyer with Womble Bond Dickinson. I want to mainly just talk about a couple things. I'll try to be super fast. The test, you all know this, but we need to focus on it. The test, the fourth prong is that this use variance will not be of substantial detriment to adjacent property. That means impact on immediate neighbors. It's not how people living 3 blocks or 10 blocks away. It's about adjacent immediate neighbors. Charleston Village Neighborhood Association has come out against this. Almost all of the immediate neighbors, I think really all of the immediate neighbors and almost everyone in the nearby vicinity has come out against this. That doesn't mean there aren't some people like spoke earlier, but when you look at the immediate neighbors, which is the test, they are against this, and there's good reason for that. Just to remind you, there's noise, there's traffic, there's parking, there's odors, there's garbage cans, there are truck deliveries, there's garbage truck pickup, there's litter. These things are real things. We know this, and you can try to mitigate those, but these are real things. And they do have a detriment on the immediate neighbors. At the last meeting, I think this board, during the discussion period at the end, generally sort of voiced their views that they didn't really think the test had been met at that point. And nothing really substantial has changed. I think the applicant is making the case that the neighbors are the problem because they won't propose conditions. But making tweaks around the edges, minor adjustments, that's really, that's really not addressing the fundamental issue that I think Mr. Batchelder described, which is a corner lot surrounded by residences is not the place for an outdoor alcohol serving restaurant. And I just want to make one more point. I know I'll have to be quiet, but City Council has been very clear about this in our zoning ordinance. The Commercial Transition District, CT District, is a place that allows commercial uses which are compatible with adjacent residential areas. Now, this isn't a CT district, but that's where City Council has said we allow commercial uses adjacent to residential areas. And they say very clearly, the code says very clearly, you cannot have an outdoor restaurant within 100 feet of any residence. Here, there are about 12 homes within 150 feet. So if you look at our ordinance, if you look at the test, this simply does not meet it. And any amount of conversation about how we're going to mitigate and do things here and there and how we want to save this building, that doesn't change the fact that the test is not satisfied. And with that, I'll be quiet because I know I've exceeded my time. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. We're out of time, Ms.
Yes, we are out of time.
Ms. Brown, you have 5 minutes for rebuttal.
I will do my best. Thank you. The vast majority of the opposition stated by Mr. Massillon and Mr. Wilson is actually just misleading and inaccurate. You heard them both say this is a bar, full service restaurant, 3 meals a day, 20 tables outside. In fact, it's 20 people. There's only 6 to 7 tables outside. We are not serving 3 meals a day. This is a counter service cafe. There are no servers bringing you food or alcoholic drinks to your tables. We are not a full service restaurant serving 3 meals a day. We're also just not a bar for people to come in and sit and have drinks. You would have to go to the bar, get your Bloody Mary and go have breakfast and sit there and eat your meal. We're not bringing you drink upon drink upon drink. Mr. Wilson's rightfully stated the CTC district ordinance, but he admittedly says this is not a CTC district. So that ordinance does not apply to this application for being 100 feet from any residence. Is not the district with which he's citing that ordinance. Just wanted to also discuss that the claim that a hardship was created by the owner, perhaps that is true, and that claim of hardship is not a condition to grant a variance is also case law, as Mr. Massillon pointed out. But the uses of this property, regardless of what they are, require a variance no matter what happens. So if it's to become a single family residence, it will require a variance for lot line setbacks and for the minimum square footage allowed on a lot. It will also require variances from FEMA and from the city for flooding. So it's 3 variances required if it's to be a single family home. If it were to be demolished and turned into a multifamily home, like the owner had proposed in 2002, that would require a rezoning or perhaps a use variance. I'm not sure which law would be required there. And if it's to be any commercial use, ours or a different one proposed, that too would require a variance. So the only path forward that doesn't require a variance, by and large, is continued demolition by neglect. So regardless of what happens, difficult decisions have to be made to grant this building some sort of variance if it is to have a renewed life in any shape or form. There was also conversation that the owners, I suppose me in this case, decided to pursue a use variance because it was a less onerous task than going through a rezoning. In my limited experience and knowledge with these sort of applications, we chose the use variance because we thought it gave the neighbors more protections. My understanding, and I'm happy to be corrected if I'm wrong, but my understanding is had we gone with a full spot rezoning, that would grant us much more leniency or a much wider breadth of use to put whatever we want into this building. So we thought we were going the path that provided the most protections to the neighborhood. And I do need to remind everyone, you can't see our house on this map, but if you were to scooch it up just a little bit, we are literally around that corner and we can walk to the property in less than 2 blocks. So if anything is going wrong with this property, everyone knows where we live. They're welcome to knock on our door. And the other opposition that we constantly hear is the reality of what could become of this building is different than what the Browns are submitting. They want it to become now. Well, that statement is true for regardless of what happens to this. If single family residence, maybe a horrible neighbor moves in. It's a multifamily residence, maybe it's 4 stories and destroys everybody's light. Another commercial venue goes in there with a rezoning or a different use variance, maybe it becomes a doggy daycare. There are all sorts of future owners who could take this building and turn it into something horrible. We're an ownership group who lives in the neighborhood, who achieved a lifelong dream of getting to live in this great city. We'd been wanting to move here forever. It took us 5 years to make it happen. We've been on record saying we want to own this thing for decades. We have no intention of flipping it. We have no intention of improving it and trying to sell it for the highest and best dollar. The criticism of us of pursuing the highest economic use, we're not so altruistic or so wealthy, I suppose, that we can just buy this building and fix it and allow it to be a corporate office where you're barely covering the property taxes on it. If there's somebody who can come forward to do that, that would be great. But no one has come forward with an idea for this lot in over 30 years. And we're the first group to present it. And we are working very hard to promise to be good stewards of this building, as are our tenants who would go into this property.
Thank you, Ms. Brown.
Right, we're out of time. Ms. Vargas.
Okay. So the public portion of the hearing is closed. My fellow board members, any questions? Concerns
Well-
from last time that were not addressed, or? Mr. Jono, go ahead.
Yes, I feel that they do not meet the 4th prong. The new information that I received this afternoon with a map showing that the cafe would be in the middle of the neighborhood, surrounded by the individuals that don't want it there. I think it would be a detriment to the community itself. I think the idea of beer, wine, and alcohol being controlled in some way, that's a dream. I think the Charleston Preservation gave a list of 6 or 7 things that they would, if we were to approve this, that they would want enacted. We can't guarantee anything like that whatsoever, but I do believe that it would be a detriment to the community. And as I stated before, the parking would also be an issue as well. So the map itself, for me, tilts the scale in the favor of the opposition, which is the neighborhood association.
Well, so the position of the Charleston Neighborhood Association just remains as it was the last time. Since we didn't hear from them again, I'm assuming that nothing changed with their opinion.
I believe
Is
that's
that
true.
correct?
I believe so. We haven't heard anything.
Well, I would just like to say that to Ms. Brown and your supporters, I really hand it to you. I think you've done a really great job at trying to bring something to this wonderful building on a great corner. I really commend your efforts. And I think that what you brought to the table tonight, showing us, some of the screening that you would have in place, trying to work with the Preservation Society's conditions and the Historic Charleston's conditions. I think that you've really done everything you can to make it work. And I think it's a really great effort. However, there's so much opposition from the adjacent neighbors that it's hard to ignore that as well. So I'm conflicted, and I do want you to know that I think, for what it's worth, that you've done a great job in presenting a really nice project.
So I found Mr. Batchelder's remark that it's a beautiful idea, it's an attractive image, but the reality of the picture may not match or align with the actual experience of the adjacent neighbors. And I think we need to focus on the variance test and that fourth prong. I'm really compelled by the issues that the adjacent neighbors have raised. It's difficult to overcome. And I just find it compelling, the arguments that have been made with respect to that piece. And I would agree that if we grant the variances, it runs with the land. So there's a forever element to it.
Yeah, I wanted to add too that after receiving the letters in support and in opposition, I was really surprised going through those that the number of neighbors surrounding this property who are in opposition that we weren't able to hear from the last meeting, weren't fully aware of the amount of people. I know it keeps being stated that it's just the adjacent property owners who are important in this, variance test, obviously. But I just wanted to point out that the matter is much more complex than just stating that a cafe would be an excellent use for this property. That we really need to take into consideration and not underestimate the validity of the adjacent neighbors' concerns and the surrounding community's concerns. And also, I agree with Mr. Maslon about the parking variance, that it doesn't seem that the board could grant the parking variance when the owners, the applicants, are creating the hardship themselves. Parking exists there. It may not be attractive. It may not fit into the scheme. I'm a city planner. Obviously, I understand the value of pedestrian activity, walking, biking, less driving, less traffic. But as far as this property is concerned, they would be reducing the amount of parking from 13 to 2, and two of those spaces are reserved for pick up to go orders, and the other one for a golf cart. So I don't even think that those necessarily serve the patrons who would be shopping there and also, eating there. So that's a concern for me. There's been a lot of talk about, in the letters that I read, and then some things we've heard about the traffic issues. Some are concerned about people parking on the lot because of the busy intersection, and that might create some traffic hazards. And then other people are concerned about not having adequate parking on the lot. And then, patrons finding alternative parking, which would probably be closer, as close as they could get, which would be a burden to the residents surrounding them. Several of the residents in the letters, and possibly that we heard from a previous meeting, mentioned that it's difficult, to find parking at times, so that this would be a burden to them. And one thing that I felt that is missing, Mr. Maslon also stated, is that we don't really have any evidence, the burden to produce some evidence in regards to some of these issues we haven't seen. We don't have a traffic study. We don't have any real assessments of those types of issues that would have been helpful for those, issues that were raised. Even regardless of if the residents didn't list any conditions this time, or the neighborhood association didn't list conditions, they do have concerns that we've heard over and over again. And I don't really, although I do feel the applicant has addressed many issues and they have done a really good job as far as the plan, they're not addressing necessarily fully the issues that and concerns that the adjacent neighbors and the surrounding neighbors have. So those are just some of my thoughts about it. I did also notice that instead of reducing the number of people in the outdoor seating area, it was actually increased. I mean, granted, it was only 2 people, but still it was increased. And there's some discrepancies in, you know, the time of closing, 6 p.m. I think the application says 6:30. So I think that there are just some things that still are still outstanding. Obviously, everyone wants to see the building restored. I mean, that's very important. But I just agree that this use is very intense for this space wedged in between all of these neighbors.
Any further discussion? Ms. Richards, Mr. Jordan? Would anyone like to make a motion?
I'll go ahead and make the motion that we deny the variance request for both variances.
Oh, what?
Mr. Jordan? Did we lose him?
He froze.
Mr. Dujon.
Dang, I can see, but I can hear the guide on me. It's up. Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll leave it right there. I'll leave it right there then.
Were you, I'm sorry, Mr. Jordan, were you a second or? I don't think you can hear me. Mr. Jordan, were you a second or had something else? Mr. Jordan, can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay, so were you seconding the motion or?
I can't hear you. I'm on the telephone right now.
Were you doing a second to the motion?
You're asking for my vote. I vote.
No, I'm just asking, were you, so the motion was made by Ms. Grass to deny both variances. We need somebody to do a second, and it sounded like you were headed in that direction.
I vote in opposition of approving the variant.
We need parliamentary procedure. I need somebody to do a second so that we can do an official vote or.
I'm sorry.
Mr. Jordan. Mr.
Yes.
Batchelder, were you?
Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can't hear you.
Can you are you going to make a second the motion to deny the request?
can we get some technological assistance?
Scott, do you have any suggestions?
Unfortunately, I don't. It looks like he's unmuted by just his phone. But that shouldn't stop him from being able to hear us.
Okay.
Can you hear me, Walter?
No, are you speaking, Lee?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Bailey,
So we need a motion, we need a second to the motion to deny. And the question for you is, were you going to second that motion?
are we voting now?
Can you hear us now? We need a second to the motion to deny the variances. Not sure what to do, you guys.
Okay. We're gonna try and call Mr. Judon, get him on the phone and hold the phone up to the computer in our office if we can.
Okay.
Hello?
Hello, can you hear us?
Yeah, go ahead.
So, Mr. Jordan, we need
I can hear
somebody
you
to
now.
second the motion, and it sounded earlier like you were doing that. Before we can proceed with a vote, we need to do somebody needs to do a second to the motion.
Wait a minute, you're still breaking up. I can't. Got my phone turned up as loud as it is go. I'm trying to do that, but I can't seem to do that. I don't know what happened. Can you hear me? I know when I'm speaking, the mic is moving on the computer.
We can hear you.
Yes. Yes, I second the motion.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion to deny, and it was seconded by Mr. Jordan. All in favor of denying the application, say aye. Ms. Grass?
Aye.
Ms. Richards?
Aye.
Mr. Jordan?
Aye.
Thank you. And Ms. Vargas says aye. So the motion, I'm sorry, the motion carries and the application is denied.
Did you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
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 All right. Mr. Batchelder.
That concludes the meeting then, I guess. The decision has been made. So thank you to all the board members.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
And have a good night.
Thank you all.
Okay.
Have a good night.
Good night, everyone.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
You can hear me now,
Yes.
right?
now we can
Now
hear
we
you.
can hear
Now
you.
we can hear you.